But in terms of leaving care, you know, there is all of this. There is all of this that I guess kind of follows the young person. And so, you know, Brighter Futures was sort of saying that, you know, yes, you need a house and you need this and you need that, but actually you need connection to the community because, in fact, after 18, you are not going to spend time with paid people.
So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the lands we meet today, which is the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and all Aboriginal people who are listening and viewing this today. And just to also acknowledge the young people and children that we support and who are the leaders of tomorrow.
Thanks, Brendan. So today on our podcast, we'll be interviewing the lovely Heidi from Anchor. And just a little bit about Heidi before we start things off. Heidi remains deeply committed to young people leaving care and has been an advocate for young people that it be a much better experience for them since leaving care since the early 1990s. Heidi has an experience herself of fostering and remaining committed to a woman now in her 40s and her family. She's a seasoned and committed human services executive with experience in government and the not-for-profit sector for over 40 years. Along with this, Heidi's got a very strong interest in the intersection between childhood trauma, disadvantage in adulthood, and a person entering the justice system. With years of experience in several states of Australia and New Zealand, Heidi has been the CEO of Anchor Incorporated for over 6 years.
Yeah, Anchor's independent community-based organisation with a proud history of serving Melbourne's outer east. Anchor supports some of the most vulnerable in our community through the provision of quality services, which includes homeless support, foster care, counselling, kinship care, community education and family reconciliation.
Yeah, so today, just before we pop into our podcast, we've titled it Leaving Care Preparation. So what's missing? So our listeners today, welcome Heidi to our podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your lovely words, both Brendan and Lee. It's lovely to join you this afternoon. No. So, you know, there's no more paid people. You know that you know, you actually need to have kind of community connection. And I'll sort of give you a couple of examples about how that played out. So you know, it took a long time. It took a long time, I've got to say, to convince the young people that were referred into Brighter Futures that it was safe and okay. And actually we were going to do something that was a bit different, because I think they just sort of thought, oh, this is just case management. Oh God, this person wants to talk to me or whatever. But we had the luxury of time to get to know that young person. And we had absolutely, and Lee knows one of the Brighter Futures consultants that we had, Natalia, and we had another person as well with just the best communication skills, who was just able to sit with a young person, hold a young person, and just explore, use a couple of tools to explore what was important to them. Not what they had to do, not what they had to do to build independence and, you know, turning on the washing machine or doing this or doing that, just actually what was their dream, what was their passion, what was their dream. And we had some amazing connections. So we had a young woman, and this is just a couple of the connections, a young woman who was in kinship care, who was very musical, and who was connected to someone who owned a recording studio up in the Yarra Ranges. Now, not in her wildest dreams could she ever have imagined meeting someone like that. And because she met that person and they, you know, they really they were wanting to support her and help her. She felt so important. And he said, yeah, I'd love you to come and record a song in the studio. That's what I'd love to be able to give to you. And it was just her dream, and it made her feel $1 million. Now, it was not to do with, leaving care goals and your goals and your skill building and all this sort of stuff. It was actually about your self-esteem. It gave her self-esteem that somebody who she viewed to be very important would spend time with her.
Yeah.
That was one thing. That was one example. Another example was a young man who was, in residential care, very difficult to engage, displayed, a lot of quite challenging behaviour. And we found out that it was found out that he kind of had a pretty big interest in cars.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? Do you, so you do go to often the traditional way would be, let's try and get him some, apprentice tasters, go to a welding shop or, whatever. Anyway, what we did was there was a guy from Knox Council who knew another guy just in the community who actually worked on classic cars, right, in his own house.
Yep.
Anyway, we said, would you like to meet this guy? He said, it took a while to sort of say yes. And finally he did. And so they maintained this relationship where the guy with the classic cars, because this kid was quite up there, and he used to just text him and say, that part from America came in. I'm going to pop it in tomorrow night. You want to come over and have a look? And just leave it open. And if the kid rocked up, the kid rocked up. If he didn't, he didn't. And he was able to have his own agency in that relationship. And he knew that the man, who was a fair bit older, a sort of an older man, he just knew, wasn't being judged. They were there to look at the car part. Wasn't that interesting? And that was it, and so we weren't trying to solve, trying to solve all this kid's problems, or issues. But actually, after that interaction, he thought, well, actually, somebody who I think is pretty cool, pretty knowledgeable, wants to spend some time with me. And isn't that great? It was all about self-esteem and connection, and that people want to spend time with me.
That is good. I think
Isn't that what drives us all?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Isn't that what drives us all? Do we all love it when someone says, wow, you're great to spend time with. I'd like to spend some more time with you. That was really enjoyable. I mean, how much do we all love that?
Absolutely.
And Heidi, how good that person's not a paid person. Do you know what I mean?
That's right. No, none of these people were paid. No, it wasn't a payment thing.
And what I feel was that what that did for that young person, letting them know that they are worth spending
worthy.
Time, and also what they see in resi when they're in the residential unit compared to just taking them out of that and just what they're actually opening themselves up for is good. Isn't that amazing?
And we've used that approach in a program that we run that young women who are early parenting or pregnant have become part of, and some of them have come out of residential care or come out of care. And we've very much used that approach of actually it's about connection. It's about them developing help-seeking behaviour. It's, that this whole thing about, them as a mother, why, I mean, yes, that's important, but actually that's her gig. That's up to her. What we can do to support is to build her self-esteem and to build her expectations and aspirations. That actually, yes, she's a mother and she's become a mother young. Yes, okay. That doesn't mean to say the life's over. That doesn't mean to say that all you do is depend on Centrelink. That just says that you've gone on a little bit of a different journey to what you thought you would. But part of your other journey of education and being your best self continues. And it works.
What's that program, Heidi?
Well, it's called, it's part of the youth foyer that we run, and this is run out of a particular premises in Lilydale.
That's fantastic. And you've really answered my question. Funny about that. So I'm going to skip a question because I said, what are some of the positive changes that you've seen in the care system? And I think you're talking about aspirational thinking, and really increasing that young person's.
Yeah, and I'd like to think that that's taking root in the system. I'd
Yeah.
like to think that things like Raising Expectations, which is a program run by the Centre for Excellence, Child and Family Welfare, the sort of the FOIA programs, some of the ethos in Better Futures, which is a leaving care program of increasing aspirations, of actually like not sort of just posting this kid into a box about, well, that's the box that you belong to. And we know with human behavior that if you basically make a person feel like they fit in this particular box because that's the way you treat them, that's the box they'll go into. That's just the way we are as human beings.
And it reminds me, Heidi, funny you should say that, in fact, that if you paint a box for them, that's the box they think they should go in to. Because in some of the beyond 21, what's it called, make it 21, the thing that Dylan's
the Homestretch campaign
that in the media release on that, it was really interesting that one of the young people in care, she's now 22, but she said all she heard her entire life in care was 42% of young people leaving care in the first 12 months will become homeless. And she kept hearing that again and again and again, and she said, I was so scared when I turned 18 that I was actually going to be a statistic. I did everything I possibly could not to. And when I got out and I got the place, and then it just fell through because it wasn't a very safe place to live. And I became homeless. I was a rough sleeper. And I just could not believe that I'd made that happen and I was another statistic. And she said that she remembers that going on in her head. And I think, even as I'm doing the pod, I'm thinking these are the statistics that we need to get out there to build the reason for the need. But then there's so many young people that do make it through and are not homeless, and that's a higher percentage. But it's interesting what they see and what they hear. And I think that's the thing I've got to watch.
And I think in Brighter Futures, what we also did in terms of the whole 2 years that we were doing it, we actually embraced what I call not the usual suspects. So as a system, we're very much in a bubble. It's just all about us and being in the bubble. But actually, there's a lot of other people who want to contribute, want to help. And during Brighter Futures, we had people, from Rotary, we had business owners, we had quite an array of different people, and certainly people outside our bubble. I think because we hear the statistics so often, we become quite, inoculated to them. But you say those statistics outside the bubble and people are incredulous. They said, what do you mean? What do you mean that you take a child away from their parents and then you make it worse for them? What do you mean? And they were quite quite cross about that. And a couple of them made it really clear to us sitting in the bubble, that's not good enough, you people. As a community, as a society, we expect better things of you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think that I think Brighter Futures sort of proved a few things to us, and that being one of them. That actually there's a lot of people who do want to help. They're a bit confused about it, and they feel there's a veil of secrecy around it all, and they're not too sure, and is this safe, and this and that and the other. But it did prove to us that other people do, they do want to support it, and that made us go even further with that community connection. And look, I think the Homestretch campaign and the way that Better Futures is set up is good. I think the campaign around Homestretch, I'd not really had a lot to do with it for a couple of years or maybe 3 years, so I was there at the beginning of it, the launch and all that sort of stuff. And it was just in Victoria. It was Paul McDonald standing up and Dylan and Victoria was quite excited about it and all this sort of thing. But what I was really pleasantly surprised about was that I went to their symposium a couple of months ago, the Homestretch symposium, and they've come a long way, a long, long way. They've actually got, they've only got 2 states now that are kind of still resisting a bit, but
That's fantastic.
and they're not there in the other states, in that really they need it in legislation that the government is responsible for children, children who grow up in care until they're 21.
Yes.
But it's nearly there, like it's getting there. And I think really right across Australia, it's more so in some states, less so in other states, but there's this realization, yes, the state is responsible. The state does need to step up, and it does need to take care of these children for as long as, we might reasonably take care of our own children. And I think most people, politicians, senior execs, all the people that have influence, they know deep in their heart they would never throw their kids out at 18. They know in their heart, well, my kids are still at home and they're 25, or my kid, I'm still supporting my child who's 21 to get through university or whatever. They all know that. And when you sort of really put it in their faces and say, is this something you would do to your own children? They go, no, I wouldn't. And that's Paul McDonald's been very clever in that, how he's articulated that. And I look, good on him and good on all the people that have helped. It's getting there. It's come a long way in 3 years, a long way.
And Heidi, have you seen the amount of unity that's not just through that, but like even within the sector, in your experience? I mean, you've got justice in your remix as well, like this remit. There's so much you're in, but have you seen, when you came into this sort of field, with leaving care and kids in care and youth, and have you seen the sector become more unified in your time, like than ever before? Do you feel like it's still like in those silos? What would you say?
Look, I think Homestretch, the campaign, has not the program. So they are two different things. But Homestretch, the campaign, and the narrative and the advocacy has certainly brought people together to try and do something about this, to actually make it happen that children and young people will be looked after until they're 21. Now, obviously, that sort of in different spaces, different states, different areas plays itself out differently. We're not all unified in that respect. But I think if we can reunify it in our values about leaving care, then that's a damn good start.
Absolutely. No, that's
which I really do think, they've not stopped, they've gone on about it, and I would say every practitioner has now heard of the Homestretch, even if they're practitioners with younger kids, or I'd say everyone's now heard of it, which is great. It's come from nothing. I mean, it came from just a genesis of an idea 4 or 5 years ago, so I mean, that's positive. And it's positive because it's shown the sector they can be on the same page, because I think in the sector it is so very complex, and it's filled with difficulty and challenges and things, so people get tired and fed up and whatever. But I think it's shown that actually you can be positively united. You can, it is possible.
And I wanted to say too, on that said way of leaving care, and we know it's beyond extended to 21 in many states, but what, in your experience, Heidi, what do you think is the best sort of time for young people? I know it's a generalized statement, to start preparing them for leaving care, but also with that aspirational thinking, not just like how to use a washing machine, how to make a bed, how to go and do your shop, how you do budgeting, but the bigger pictures, like thinking of your dreams and aspirations, leaving care, because
look, I've been reflecting on this question as well, and I think probably what I would say first and foremost is I try not to call it leaving care. I try to call it transitioning from care. And if we call it transitioning from care, in reality, you can start that process from the moment the child comes into care. So it can be a transition for as long as you like. For as long as you like. So, is it a definite 15? Well, the policy and the frameworks we work in terms of the statutory kids, that's what it would suggest. And that's just, I suppose, based on what we think 15-year-olds are able to take on board. That they're actually, potentially able to get a longer view of their lives. I don't know about you, but my view of my life at 15 was not all that long, I've got to say. It was probably, my next birthday or the next party or whatever. It kind of wasn't all that long. So I've just got to say, as I say, I think it is that transitioning. And a lot of young people have reflected that the moment someone said to them about, oh, well, we need to start planning for your leaving care, they got frightened.
Yeah.
Because they might have only just felt safe where they were. And then someone said, oh, all about your leaving care. Well, what do you mean leaving care? Leaving to what? Leaving, And so I think we've got to be very careful about it. I mean, I think that it's important, and this is, in Brighter Futures, certainly we worked with kids as young as 14, and it was to start building those dreams. And I think that's when we're talking about transitioning from, leaving care, transitioning from care, there's a few pillars. One is kind of repairing some of that self-esteem and repairing some of that self-identity of actually, that why you came into care and how the world works and things like that. I think that there's that. And I also think it is, the other really key pillar is repairing relationships.
Yeah.
So along the way, there's a lot of broken relationships with all sorts of people. Could be old school friends, it could be family, it could be neighbours, could be all sorts of people. And repairing those relationships really is very, very important. And one of the things I think we don't do especially well is we don't look at a progression of a young person being on a journey to understand their family. I always say the most important thing we can do for a young person, who's going to be transitioning out of care, is to prepare them to reconnect with family, to live within their family, to live within their context, and to live safely and positively. That is what we have to do. If we're preparing them for anything else, then we've missed the target. Because we can do any number of things to get them to clean a house or do this or do the other, but yourself, Lee, the moment they're able to, it's back to family. Many of these kids want to get home, not because they want to be bloody minded or to shove it up us or whatever, not because of that at all, but because they're scared for either other siblings, mum who stayed with a dad, they're scared for their families. They're scared their families are not coping, because they know that's why they came into care. So a lot of boys will align themselves with mum, and they'll start running away at sort of 13, 14, saying, no, I need to get back to mum. I need to make sure she's all right. I need to know she's safe. I've got these other siblings. I need to make sure they're safe. With girls, it's often, same sort of thing. I need to get home to look after the family because I know they're not doing very well.
Wow.
That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing here. So we have to prepare these young people to be able to do that and to understand the complexity of that, but also to work with them to really, I suppose in a sense, to really come to a reasonable position about what their responsibility is and what it's not. I've got a woman that I've known for quite some years, who is an incredibly intelligent woman who spent quite a long time in care with her siblings, and for her it was that she felt she needed to get back to help mum, which is exactly what she did, and found herself really in the quicksand because the complexity of helping mum and helping all the other siblings and things was way too much for any one person, and it nearly drowned her. And I guess in a sense I worked with some other people to support her to develop another life, and it's a parallel life now. So she has her life and there's the life of her family, and she is pretty good now, mid-20s or so, of when do I need to get involved and when do I need to step back? When do I need to get involved? Like what will give me bang for buck? So if a certain situation is going on, I think it's probably fair to say she can make some decision about, okay, well, what am I responsible for here? What else can I help with? If I can't help with things, I need to just keep going on my pathway.
That's so good.
Because that's what I owe myself.
Yeah. That's powerful.
And but it takes a very long time. That takes a long time. So that, as I say, that woman is mid-20s or so, and it's taken quite some years. So I think that's the thing that when you talk about age of leaving care, I think you've got to think about the things you need to engage young people in for their transition to be healthy and positive, rather than a moment in time we start talk about leaving care, because they should never be made to feel that they're leaving care. They're leaving people caring for them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
because they're not leaving that.
Yeah, that's negative connotations, isn't it? You know,
they're not leaving from people who care, because in fact there's often a lot of people who care. They're not leaving that.
No.
So thank you so much for joining us today.
No problem at all. It was delightful to do it. Yeah.
And I recorded this and I actually wrote these words. It'll be enriching experience for us all, because it was. I just want to thank you for what you shared, because you share it from a visionary perspective and somebody that's walked in the journey and held the ground for such a long time and just keeps moving that piano slowly across to the other side. And you've got that, exactly what you just said, the tenacity.
Yeah.
I can see the tenacity of the long, just staying in the game. So it's just been gold. And I feel like I've gleaned so much already from knowing you.
Thank you.
But even today, just for our listeners, I think knowing it from somebody that's in the sector, that's working in there and has been for just 6 years at Anchor, but before that, all of this other experience.
Yeah.